Hello guys and welcome back to TechWolf and to this Cisco Packet Tracer course. And in this tutorial of this Cisco Packet Tracer course we will create a network in Cisco Packet Tracer consisting of a dedicated DHCP server, a router, a switch, two PCs and a printer. And we will configure our DHCP server. We will configure also our router using CLI. And in this tutorial you will also understand what are dynamic IP addresses and what are fixed IP addresses, and we will reserve 10 IP addresses from IP address pool which we will assign to DHCP server so we can use them as fixed IP addresses. And for our printer we will use a static IP address from reserved range of these 10 IP addresses which we will reserve while configuring our DHCP server. And this will reflect real world best practices where printers are typically assigned the static IP address to ensure consistent access. And one of the key reasons for reserving a range of IP addresses in DHCP configuration is to accommodate devices like printers or for example routers which benefit from fixed IP addresses. So let's start by setting up our network topology, and we will start by clicking here in the left bottom corner on network devices, and in second tab make sure that you click on routers. To the right here we need to select our router, and we will be using router 2811. And this is the last router here, so click on this router, click somewhere on workspace so we add this router. I will make it a little bit bigger. Next we need to add a switch, and we will be using switch 2960, so also make sure you are in network devices, and here in the second tab select switches and select switch 2960 which is first switch, and click somewhere on workspace. And to add a server, here in the left bottom corner click on end devices, and to the right here you will see server. Click on server and click somewhere on workspace. I will add my server here, and this will be our DHCP server. And now let's add also here, while we are in end devices, two PCs. So click on PC, click on workspace and click again on PC and click on workspace again. And here also in end devices click on printer-pt and click somewhere on screen. So now we have all devices, and now let's connect them with copper straight through cable. So click here in the left bottom corner on connections and select copper straight through cable, and let's click on our router, and on router let's select port fast Ethernet 0/0. So remember the name of the port, like I'm always mentioning in these tutorials. Remember these are the names of the ports. So click on fast Ethernet 0/0 and click on switch, and we will connect our router to our switch on fast Ethernet 0/1 port. Click again on copper straight through cable. Let's click on our switch. Let's click on fast Ethernet 0/2. Let's click on our server and let's connect it to fast Ethernet 0. Now let's connect all the other devices. Copper straight through cable. Click on switch. Fast Ethernet 0/3. Click on first computer. Let's click on fast Ethernet. Click again copper straight through cable. Fast Ethernet 0/4 on our PC1. Fast Ethernet, and let's click on copper straight through cable to our switch fast Ethernet 0/5, and let's click on our printer and fast Ethernet 0. And now let's add a note under our router what IP we will be assigning to this router. Click here in notes in the right top corner. Let's click under router, and to this router we will be assigning IP address 192.168.1.1, and this will be also our gateway address. We are adding this IP address so we just can visualize and see our IP address. So as we will be assigning IP address to server, as server also needs to have an IP address on network. So again let's click on node and let's click under our server, and let's add an IP address 192.168.1.2. When you have a DHCP server, you also must have IP address for our DHCP server. And here, as you know from our previous tutorials, the connection between our router and between our switch is not established because of the reason that we need to assign a port, the port which we connected, which was fast Ethernet 0/1 on our router, and we need to give an IP address to that port and we need to turn this port on our router. And this IP address which we will assign to this port on our router. This will be also a gateway address to our devices on this local area network whenever they will want to connect or communicate to outside networks. And now once we have set up our network topology, let's configure our router, and we have been doing it already in our previous tutorials. So to configure a router using CLI or command line interface, click on router. You could configure this router, like I mentioned, just by going into the config tab and clicking into this interface. As you see, under interfaces we have these two ports or two interfaces, where one is fast Ethernet 0/0 and another is fast Ethernet 0/1. You could add configurations to these router's ports here by using this user interface. However, we will not be doing it. And like I mentioned, we will be configuring fast Ethernet 0/0 port, as this is the port on our router to which we connected our switch, and currently this connection is not established. And here is IP configuration, where you can configure IPv4 address for this port on this router, and where you can add subnet mask for this router. And if you want to enable, here is port status, you could click on. However, we will be doing this using CLI, so click into the CLI. Currently we are in router config if, exit. So we exit this until you will get to router config mode. But if you are not here, type in exit again, and you type in exit again until you will get to this mode, router triangle closing bracket. Type in command enable and hit enter, and then type in configure terminal and hit enter. I made some mistakes, so type in configure space and terminal and hit enter. Now we have entered that configuration mode. What we need to do, we need to select this port on our router. If you are watching these videos, you already know how to do it. We type in a command interface and this interface name, space and this port's name, and this port's name was fast Ethernet 0/0 and hit enter. And by typing in this command interface fast Ethernet 0/0, we have simply selected this port on our router. We are saying port, select this port fast Ethernet 0/0, and now we want to execute some action on this port. And in our scenario, we want to assign this static IP address to our port. So to assign IP address, we type in command IP space address, and we specify the IP address and subnet mask for this particular port, and that will be 192.168.1.1 and then space and 255.255.255.0. Here, like I mentioned, we are specifying IP address for the port which we have selected with previous command. And once you have done this, hit enter, and IP address and subnet mask to this port will be added. And if you want to check it, you can go back here in the top on config tab, and under interfaces select fast Ethernet 0/0 port, and you will see that IPv4 address. Currently it is added and subnet mask is also added. However, this port is still not enabled. You can see it here that port status is not check marked. Like I mentioned, you could check mark it here manually, and here we can see this red, that connection between our switch and our router is not established. So in next step we need to establish also this connection. So let's go back into our CLI. Let's enable this port, and to enable port, we use a command here in CLI no space shutdown and hit enter. And once we will hit enter, this port automatically will be enabled and or turned on, and connection between our router and switch will start establishing. Let's hit enter. The red triangle turned into green, and this connection between our router and our switch is being established. We have configured our router. Let's configure also our server. And for server, first thing what we need to configure is its static IP address. So let's start by assigning this static IP address to the server, and to do that we need to also, similar way as we assigned the port to our router, to assign this IP address or static IP address to port on our server. And on our server the port was fast Ethernet 0. So let's click on the server, click on config, and here under interfaces you will see this fast Ethernet 0. and click into this fast Ethernet 0, and this is where we can assign this static IP address for this port on our server, which is 192.168.1.2, and this is static or fixed IP address. Make sure that in IP configuration you are clicked into the static, and where it says IPv4 address, in this field let's assign this address 192.168.1.2, and in subnet mask click in and it will get populated automatically. If it doesn't, then we assign 255.255.255.0, and now we want to create IP address pool which this DHCP server in our scenario will be able to assign to all other devices on our network. And to do that, click into services, and here under services you will find DHCP. So click into the DHCP, and here you will see interface fast Ethernet 0. Make sure that this is selected, and here make sure that this is turned on. So service is turned on, and here where is pool name, usually we give a name to this IP address pool which we are giving to DHCP server, so that DHCP server can use this pool of IP addresses to assign them to devices on our local area network. I will call this pool LAN or local area network underscore pool. You can call this pool however you want. In next step we need to specify default gateway address, and our default gateway address for this server is 192.168.1.1, which is a router's address. Once we will specify default gateway address here this default gateway address will also be assigned by DHCP server to all other devices on this network, which will be obtaining IP address dynamically from our DHCP server. So let's click into our DHCP configuration, to this DHCP service configuration, and let's assign this default gateway which is 192.168.1.1. The starting IP address, as you can see, 192, it populated it automatically, 168.1.0 with subnet mask 255.255.255.255. Here we have specified the range of IP addresses with its subnet, which this DHCP server will be able to assign to devices on this local area network. If we have 192.168.1.0, this means that we will have 254 available devices on this particular network. And first device which will be assigned by this DHCP server will start with IP address of 192.168.1, and here will be not 0 but .1. However, this is already reserved for our router with .1, and with .2 it is already reserved for our DHCP server itself. So it will start assigning, for example, for first computer IP address with .3, and actually I will leave it, and then later I will show you how you can configure this so you can reserve first 10 addresses so you can assign them manually to the devices which require static IP addresses. Like I mentioned, one of such would be router, because you don't want this IP address to be changed once you assign it to a router as a gateway address. So as you wouldn't want this DHCP server's IP address to be changed as well, so that also should be assigned manually, and that should be a static IP address. So as for our printer, that also should be a static IP address, because as network administrator we don't want our printer's IP address to be changed or to be dynamically assigned by DHCP server, as that way we can make sure that these devices or users on that local area network, they will always be able to connect to our gateway, will be always able to connect to DHCP, and they will always be able to go to printer by the same IP address to use that printer. I will leave it as it is, and I will close this down. And now let's click into our first PC, and let's click into desktop, and let's go into IP configuration. Here by default it is set to static IP addressing, and here we will click into the DHCP, and once we will click into the DHCP, that DHCP server, as you can see, assigned IP address, and it assigned IP address 192.168.1.3, and this is a dynamically assigned IP addresses where we to our router assign static IP address. This IP address to our router is not obtained by DHCP server. So as the IP address which ends with .2 we assign to our server. So the first available address in this DHCP IP address pool ends with .3, and that's why it assigned it automatically to this PC. But now, for example, if we would want to reserve on DHCP server first 10 IP addresses so we can assign them only manually as static IP addresses to all devices which we want, like routers, servers for example, or printer in our scenario, which we will do a bit later, then we need to modify this DHCP address pool. So I will click now back to static here for this first computer. I go back to our DHCP server, click on server, click into DHCP here, and here in service make sure that it is turned on, and to reserve first 10 IP addresses, here where it says start IP address, at the end instead of 0 type in 11. So it starts assigning these dynamic IP addresses for the devices which use DHCP to obtain IP on this local area network, so they will start obtaining IP addresses starting from 11. Where is DNS server? There I will enter 8.8.8.8. So this DNS server will be Google's server, and click here on save. Let's close this down. Let's go to our first PC. Let's click on it, let's click IP configuration, and here select DHCP. By default it is static. Let's select DHCP, and you will see that now IP address which is assigned is 192.168.1.11. This means that it starts assigning IP addresses, and we have reserved first 10 IP addresses. Now in DHCP pool there is not anymore 254 available IP addresses, but there is only available 244 available IP addresses in this range. If we click back into our DHCP under the services, as you can see it starts with 11. So if that is 0, this means that we have 254, and here you can also see that maximum number of users is 245. This means that it can assign only 245 or 244 to be exact IP addresses to devices on this network. And now we can do exactly the same. So let's click on our second PC, which is PC1. Click here into desktop. Let's click IP configuration, and this should end with .12. Let's select DHCP. So DHCP assigns IP address, and DNS server, as you can see, it's also assigned by DHCP server as it is in real time. And here we can see that IPv4 address is 192.168.1.12. So we have created this pool of IP addresses, and we reserved first 10 IP addresses for devices which we want to assign manually, or to create these static kind of IP or fixed IP addresses, like for router, for server itself. And now if we click into printer, we click into the config tab, and we also connected this printer on this port fast Ethernet 0. You also click into it, and here we can assign its static IP address. We could allow DHCP server to assign it. If we click on DHCP, that would be like .13, as you can see, but we don't want DHCP server. Like I mentioned, in real world scenario, printers would have a static or fixed IP addresses, so they are not changed based on time zones or on time which is specified by DHCP. So we want a static IP to be assigned to our printer, and here we can assign IP address, one of the very first ones which we have reserved. So for our router we assigned IP address which ends with .1. For our server we assigned IP address which ends with .2. So for our printer let's assign IP address which ends with .3. So 192.168.1.3. And subnet mask the same, 255.255.255.0. And let's close this down. Let's make sure that our devices are able to communicate. So we will open the very first computer. Let's open a command prompt, and let's try to ping our printer, for example, because printer is also on the network and it should reply anyway. So type in ping space 192.168.1.3, because we assigned this IP address to our printer, and hit enter. And as you can see, printer is replying. This means that these two devices are able to communicate. Now we can also ping our second computer where we had assigned IP address. If I click into it, let's go into IP configuration, and here you can see DHCP assigned IP address which ends with .12. So let's go back on our first computer and let's ping the IP address, like I mentioned, 192.168.1.12 and hit enter. And as you can see, pinging is also taking place. So the devices on our network are able to communicate, and the DHCP server is assigning IP addresses. So as we excluded first 10 IP addresses, we reserved them for the devices where we want to assign manually static IP addresses for devices like routers, printers, or for example servers on network. So yes guys, hope that you found this video useful. If you did, leave a like, share this video, subscribe to the channel if you are new, and see you in the next one.